Captain Lee Minho was drinking his morning coffee when the alarms started screaming across Earth Defense Station Alpha 7. The hot liquid spilled down his uniform as he jumped from his chair and rushed to the command center. Red warning lights flashed everywhere, and the sound was loud enough to wake the dead. "What is happening out there?" Minho shouted over the noise as he reached his command post. His crew was running around like ants whose hill had been kicked over. Lieutenant Kim Taiho looked up from his communications panel with wide eyes. "Sir, we have 500 unknown ships approaching our solar system. They are massive, really massive." Dr. Park Hannah was already at her science station pulling up data on the main screen. She was the smartest person Minho knew when it came to alien life and space technology. "Captain, these ships are unlike anything in our databases. They are each about 10 kilometers long and covered in what appears to be decorative spikes and glowing parts." Minho walked closer to the main display screen. What he saw there made him stop and stare. The alien ships looked like something from a bad science fiction movie. They had huge spikes sticking out everywhere. Bright lights flashed along their hulls in patterns that served no clear purpose. Some ships even appeared to have flame designs painted on their sides. "Are you serious?" Minho asked nobody in particular. "They look like teenagers designed these things." Engineer Choi Nara came running from the technical section with a tablet in her hands. She was breathing hard and her hair was messy from working on the station systems. "Captain, I have been analyzing their ship designs from our long-range scanners. These vessels appear to prioritize appearance over function. Look at these structural weak points." She showed Minho her tablet screen. It displayed a technical breakdown of one alien ship. Red circles marked dozens of obvious design flaws. The decorative spikes created stress concentration points that would break off in any real battle. The glowing lights consumed enormous amounts of power for no tactical advantage. The flame decorations actually made the ships easier to track on sensors. "This has to be a joke," Minho muttered as he studied the data. The alien fleet continued its approach toward Earth. They moved in perfect formation, like they were putting on a parade rather than conducting a military operation. Each ship maintained exact spacing from its neighbors. Their lights pulsed in synchronized patterns that looked pretty but served no tactical purpose. Lieutenant Kim Taiho suddenly straightened up at his station. "Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the alien fleet. They are broadcasting on all frequencies." "Put it on the main speakers," Minho ordered. Static filled the command center for a moment. Then a deep voice spoke in perfect English, with an accent that sounded like someone trying too hard to sound scary. "Primitive species of the third planet, witness the might of the Cromelian Empire. Your surrender is inevitable. Prepare for subjugation. We are the terror of 1,000 worlds. Your pathetic defenses cannot stand against our overwhelming power. Submit now, and your deaths will be quick." The command center fell silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then Captain Lee Minho started laughing. It began as a small chuckle, but quickly grew into full belly laughter. He doubled over and had to hold onto his command chair to keep from falling down. "You think that is supposed to be scary?" Minho gasped between laughs. "You sound like a bad actor in a theater play." Dr. Park Hannah tried to maintain her professional composure, but a smile crept across her face. The psychological profile of their communications suggests they believe intimidation through dramatic presentation will be effective against human psychology. Lieutenant Kim Taiho was covering his mouth with his hand to hide his grin. "Sir, should I prepare our standard first contact protocols?" "First contact protocols?" Minho wiped tears from his eyes. "Taiho, look at those ships again. Really look at them." The crew turned their attention back to the main display. The alien fleet had moved closer, and more details were visible. The ships were even more ridiculous up close. They had skull designs carved into their hulls. Fake dragon heads stuck out from the front of some vessels. Others had what appeared to be giant swords mounted on top for no apparent reason. Engineer Choi Nara shook her head in disbelief. The captain from an engineering perspective, these ships are disasters waiting to happen. The skull carvings weaken the hull integrity. Those sword decorations create massive wind resistance in atmospheric flight. The dragon heads block their own forward sensor arrays. It gets better, Dr. Park Hannah added as she pulled up more detailed scans. Their energy signatures show they are using approximately 60% of their power generation. Just to run those decorative lights and holographic displays, Minho started laughing again. So they are flying around the galaxy with ships that use more power to look scary than to actually function? That appears to be correct, sir, Dr. Park Hannah confirmed. The alien transmission came through the speakers again. This time the voice sounded slightly less confident. Humans of Earth, you have witnessed our mighty fleet. Your silence indicates your terror at our overwhelming presence. Prepare to receive our terms of surrender. Lieutenant Kim Tai-ho looked at Captain Minho with raised eyebrows. Sir, they think we are silent because we are terrified? Oh, this is rich, Minho chuckled. They have no idea we have been analyzing their ships and finding them hilariously impractical. Engineer Choi Nara was still studying her technical readings. Captain, I count at least 47 major design flaws per ship. These vessels would not survive their first real battle against any competent opponent, but they sure do look impressive from far away, Dr. Park Hannah observed. I suspect their strategy relies entirely on psychological intimidation rather than actual military capability. Captain Minho straightened up and tried to compose himself. His crew was watching him with amused expressions. Everyone in the command center had heard the alien threats and seen their ridiculous ships. The contrast between the dramatic words and the impractical designs had turned what should have been a terrifying first contact into a comedy show. All right, people, Minho said, still fighting back chuckles. Let us give these Cromelians a proper human welcome. Tai-ho, open a channel. To their flagship, channel open, sir? Minho cleared his throat and tried to sound official. This is Captain Lee Minho of Earth Defense Station Alpha 7 to the Cromelian fleet. We have received your message and would like to extend an invitation for peaceful first contact discussions. Also, we have some questions about your ship designs that we think you might find interesting. The transmission ended, and the command center waited for a response. Somewhere out there, 500 alien ships filled with creatures who thought they were the terror of the galaxy were about to discover that humans had a very different reaction to intimidation than they expected. Captain Minho looked around at his crew and grinned. I have a feeling this is going to be a very interesting day. Supreme Commander Vexstar stood in the center of his flagship's command bridge, surrounded by glowing panels and holographic displays. His ship was the largest in the fleet and had the most impressive decorations. Golden spikes covered the hull, and red flames painted along the sides made it look like a demon ship from ancient legends. The bridge itself was designed to intimidate anyone who entered. Dark metal walls rose high above with carved skulls watching from every corner. Purple lights cast eerie shadows across the room. Everything was built to make visitors feel small and afraid. But right now, Vexstar was the one feeling confused and worried. He had been conquering planets for over 50 years. Every species he encountered followed the same pattern. First they saw his mighty fleet, then they trembled in fear. Finally, they surrendered without a fight. It was a simple and effective system. This human response was completely different. Instead of the expected terror and begging for mercy, the aliens had received something they had never encountered before. The humans were making loud, continuous sounds that their translators could not properly interpret. They were also showing their teeth in what appeared to be aggressive displays. Commander, the human response is most unusual, reported his second-in-command, Crick Small. The smaller alien was nervously checking readouts on multiple screens. Our psychological warfare. Specialists cannot classify their behavior patterns. Vexstar examined the recordings of the human transmission again. The human leader had been making those strange, loud sounds while water leaked from his eyes. Other humans in the background were doing the same thing. They kept showing their teeth and making gestures that looked like dominance displays. Eps. They are trying to show us they are not afraid, Vexstar suggested. Some species attempt to appear brave even when facing certain doom. But Sir Cricksmall replied while pulling up more data. Our sensors indicate their stress levels are actually decreasing rather than increasing. Their heart rates are normal. Their brain activity shows patterns associated with pleasure, rather than fear. This made no sense to Vexstar. Every other species had responded to his fleet with rising panic levels and obvious signs of terror. The Zelthorians had immediately surrendered when they saw just one of his ships. The Mordok Empire had collapsed after receiving his standard intimidation message. Even the warrior clans of Proxima had begged for mercy within hours. "Sir, we are receiving another transmission from the human station," reported the communications. "Officer, put it through," Vexstar ordered. A new human voice came through the speakers. This one sounded older and more formal. "Greetings to the Chromalian fleet. I am Ambassador Song Ji-hoon, representing Earth's diplomatic corps. We would like to arrange a face-to-face meeting to discuss your visit to our solar system. We are very interested in learning more about your culture and technology." Vexstar was even more confused now. The humans wanted to meet with them directly. This had never happened before. Usually, conquered species tried to avoid contact as long as possible while they prepared their surrender documents. "Also," the human ambassador continued, "our engineers have some questions about your ship designs that they would like to discuss. We think you might find their observations interesting." The transmission ended, and Vexstar looked around his bridge at his confused crew. Ship design questions? What could primitive humans possibly want to know about superior Chromalian technology? Perhaps they want to understand our weapons so they can better appreciate their hopeless situation, suggested Crixmall. "Yes, that must be it," Vexstar agreed. "They want to learn how outmatched they are before they surrender." "Very well. We'll arrange this meeting and show them the full power of our technology. Prepare the intimidation chamber." The intimidation chamber was Vexstar's favorite room on the ship. It was designed to make visiting aliens feel powerless and afraid. The ceiling was 3 times higher than necessary. Massive holographic displays showed images of conquered worlds. The walls were covered with weapons and trophies from defeated enemies. Everything glowed with threatening red light. 2 hours later, a small human shuttle approached the Chromalian flagship. Vexstar watched through his bridge screens as the tiny craft moved toward his massive vessel. The human ship looked incredibly plain compared to his decorated dreadnought. It had no spikes, no threatening colors, no intimidating designs at all. It was just a simple gray metal box with engines. "How can they travel in such a boring ship?" wondered Crixmell. "Do humans have no sense of style or intimidation?" "Clearly they are a primitive species," Vexstar replied. "Do not understand the importance of appearing powerful and dangerous." The human shuttle docked with the flagship, and 3 humans came aboard. Vexstar had expected them to be trembling with fear when they saw his ship's interior. Instead, they seemed to be looking around with great interest and making quiet comments to each other. Ambassador Song Ji-hoon was a middle-aged human with gray hair and a calm expression. Captain Yoon Sora was younger and appeared to be some kind, a military officer. The 3rd human was Technician Bae Woojin, who carried several electronic devices and kept scanning everything. Around him, they were escorted to the intimidation chamber where Vexstar waited in his most impressive armor. The room's systems activated as the humans entered. Holographic flames danced along the walls. Images of destroyed planets played on giant screens. Threatening music echoed from hidden speakers. Vexstar expected the humans to fall to their knees in terror. Instead, Captain Yoon Sora looked around the room and made a comment that the translators picked up clearly. "Did you guys hire the same decorator as every evil villain lair in our movies?" Ambassador Song Ji-hoon tried to maintain a serious, diplomatic expression, but the corners of his mouth kept twitching upward. Technician Bae Woojin was openly scanning the room's technology and taking notes on his devices. "Welcome inferior humans to the might of the Chromalian Empire," Vexstar announced in his most threatening voice. "You stand in the presence of the conqueror of 1,000 worlds. Tremble before my power and prepare to discuss your surrender." The humans exchanged glances with each other. Ambassador Song Ji-hoon stepped forward with what appeared to be a respectful bow. "Thank you for welcoming us aboard your impressive vessel, Supreme Commander. We are honored by this meeting. However, before we discuss any formal agreements, our technical staff has some questions about your ship designs that we hope you can help us understand." Technician Bae Woojin raised his hand like a student in a classroom. Yes, we were wondering about the structural integrity of those decorative spikes on your hull. Our analysis suggests they create stress concentration points that could compromise the ship's armor in combat situations. Vexstar blinked in confusion. This was not how conquered species were supposed to behave. They should be begging for mercy, not asking technical questions about his ship's construction. Also, added Captain Yoon Sora, we noticed that your glowing hull decorations make your ships visible from several light years away. Doesn't that make stealth operations impossible? For the first time in 50 years of conquering planets supreme, Commander Vexstar found himself completely at a loss for words. These humans were treating his intimidation display like a technical presentation rather than a demonstration of overwhelming power. Something was going very wrong with this conquest. But Vexstar could not figure out exactly what it was. The formal meeting began in the intimidation chamber with Supreme Commander Vexstar trying to regain control of the situation. He activated more holographic displays showing the destruction of enemy fleets and conquered planets. The threatening music grew louder, and red warning lights flashed across the walls. Behold the fate of those who dare oppose the Cromelian Empire, Vexstar announced with his most menacing voice. Your pathetic world will join this list of defeated civilizations, unless you submit immediately. Dr. Lim Su-ben, the cultural anthropologist who had joined the diplomatic team, pulled out a small notebook and began writing observations. She seemed fascinated by the alien display rather than frightened by it. This is remarkable, she said. To her colleagues, they've developed an entire culture based on theatrical intimidation. Psychological principles are actually quite sophisticated, even if the execution is somewhat heavy-handed. General Kwon Do-yan, Earth's military strategic advisor, was studying the holographic images of destroyed fleets with professional interest. Interesting tactical data, he commented.
Ow.
Though I notice all these battle recordings show the enemy ships exploding very easily. Either your weapons are incredibly powerful, or your opponents had very poor defensive systems. Vexstar was becoming increasingly frustrated. These humans were supposed to be cowering in terror, not taking notes and making analytical comments about his most sacred conquest recordings. Silence, he roared. You will show proper respect for your future masters. Ambassador Song Ji-hoon raised his hand politely. With respect, Supreme Commander, we are showing you the highest form of respect. By paying careful attention to your presentations, our colleague Dr. Lim Su-ben is documenting your cultural practices for our archives. And General Kwon Do-yan is analyzing your military achievements. However, added technician Bae Woo-jin, we do have some concerns about your current fleet configuration that we thought you should know about. Krixmal, who had been silently observing the humans, stepped forward nervously. Supreme Commander, perhaps we should hear what the humans have discovered. It might be useful intelligence. Vexstar was torn between his desire to maintain the intimidation ceremony and his curiosity about what these strange humans had found. Very well. Speak quickly, primitive creature. Technician Bae Woo-jin activated a holographic projector and displayed a detailed technical analysis of the Cromelian fleet. The image showed a cutaway view of one of their dreadnoughts, with numerous red warning indicators scattered across its structure. We identified 17 critical vulnerabilities in your ship designs during our initial scans. Bae Woo-jin explained matter-of-factly. The decorative spikes create structural weak points that would cause catastrophic hull failure under sustained weapons fire. The glowing energy conduits are completely unshielded and represent obvious target points for enemy attacks. Dr. Lim Su-ben added her observations. From a psychological warfare perspective, your intimidation displays are actually counterproductive against technologically advanced opponents. The excessive visual elements draw attention to your ship's functional weaknesses rather than concealing them. General Kwon Do-yan nodded in agreement. Our formation flying is impressive for parades, but it makes your entire fleet vulnerable. 2 area effect weapons. A single well-placed explosive device could damage multiple ships simultaneously. Vexstar felt his confidence crumbling as the humans continued their analysis. These were supposed to be primitive creatures who surrendered. at the first sight of his mighty fleet. Instead, they were giving him a detailed, technical critique of his military strategy. Journalist Oh Hae-sung, who'd been quietly recording the entire encounter, raised her camera to document the alien reactions. She had been streaming the meeting, live to Earth, and the viewing numbers were climbing rapidly as more humans tuned in to watch the historic first contact. "This is incredible," she whispered to her colleagues. "The entire galaxy is going to see this. These aliens built their whole empire on looking scary rather than actually being effective." Krixmal was frantically taking notes on everything the humans said. As Vextor's chief technical advisor, he was beginning to realize that their ship designs really did have serious problems. The humans were pointing out flaws that had been ignored for centuries because no one had ever dared to question. Chromalian military superiority. "Wait," Krixmal interrupted. "Are you saying that our glowing hole markings make us easier to detect on sensors?" "Oh yes," confirmed technician Bae Woojin. "Your ships are visible from approximately 4 light-years away due to their energy emissions. Any competent military force would be able to track your movements long before you reach their territory." Doctor. Lim Suben consulted her notebook. "We also noticed that your ships appear to use approximately 60% of their power generation for decorative displays rather than essential systems. This significantly reduces your operational efficiency. In combat endurance?" General Kwon Do-yan pulled up another holographic display showing comparative fleet movements. "Your standard intimidation approach also telegraphs your intentions. You always move in formation, always broadcast threatening messages, and always demand surrender before attacking. This gives your opponents maximum time to prepare countermeasures." Vextor was speechless. In one short meeting, these humans had dismantled the fundamental principles that the Chromalian Empire had used to conquer half the galaxy. Everything he had believed about his military superiority was being questioned by creatures he had expected to defeat without firing a single shot. But we have conquered 1,000 worlds using these methods. Ambassador Song Ji-hoon nodded respectfully. "And that is quite an achievement. However, we suspect that your success has been due to your opponent's psychological responses rather than your actual military capabilities. Fear is a powerful weapon, but it only works against those who are afraid." The breaking point came when technician Bae Woojin asked the question that would haunt Vextor for the rest of his life. "So did these ships actually work in combat, or are they just for parades?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence for the Chromalian Empire's reputation. Vextor realized that he could not answer honestly without admitting that his feared fleet had never actually fought a real battle against a competent opponent. Every conquest had followed the same pattern. Chromalians would arrive with their intimidating fleet, broadcast their threatening messages, and watch as the target species surrendered without resistance. They had become so successful at psychological warfare that they had never needed to test their ships in actual combat. Journalist Oh Hae-sung was still broadcasting live to Earth. Her viewer count had reached over 2 billion humans. The footage was also being picked up by alien communication networks across the galaxy. Species that had been intimidated by similar Chromalian displays were now watching humans casually expose the Empire's fundamental weaknesses. Krixmal leaned close to Vextor and whispered urgently, "Supreme Commander, we need to end this meeting immediately. If this broadcast spreads to other worlds, every species in the galaxy will know that our ships are designed for show rather than actual warfare." But it was already too late. The damage was done. Humans had accomplished in one meeting what the Chromalian Empire's enemies had failed to do in centuries of warfare. They had revealed that the galaxy's most feared military force was essentially an elaborate bluff backed up by impressive special effects. Vextor looked around his intimidation chamber with new eyes. The threatening decorations that had once filled him with pride now seemed childish and wasteful. The holographic displays that had terrified countless alien leaders now looked like cheap theater props. For the first time in his long career as a galactic conqueror, Supreme Commander Vextor felt genuinely afraid. But his fear was not of human weapons or human threats. He was afraid of human laughter, human questions, and human common sense. The galaxy was about to change forever. And it was all because humans had treated his intimidation display like an engineering problem rather than a demonstration of power. The live broadcast from journalist Oh Hai-sung had reached every corner of the galaxy within 6 hours. Communication networks that normally carried entertainment shows and news updates were now flooded with recordings of humans casually dismantling the Cromelian Empire's reputation. The footage spread faster than the Empire could respond or contain it. On the distant world of Zephyria Prime, rebel leader Zephyr watched the human broadcast with growing amazement. His people had surrendered to the Cromalians 3 years ago after seeing their intimidating fleet approach their planet. Now he was discovering that those same ships were essentially expensive parade floats with serious design flaws. "Gather the Resistance Council immediately," Zephyr ordered his communications officer. "We need to see this human analysis for ourselves." Similar scenes were playing out across dozens of star systems. Species that had been living under Cromelian rule were suddenly realizing they had been tricked by elaborate theater rather than conquered by superior military force. The psychological spell that had held the Empire together for centuries was breaking, part in real time. Admiral Nam Guan was in Earth's primary command center when the first alien communication requests started arriving. Her staff was struggling to handle the flood of incoming messages from species across the galaxy. "Admiral, we have 17 different alien governments requesting immediate military consultations," reported her aide. "They all want Earth's assessment of various Cromalian fleet configurations." 18 now, added another officer. "The Andromedan Federation just sent an urgent request for technical analysis of their local Cromalian occupation force." Admiral Nam Juan looked at the main display screen showing a galactic map. Red indicators were appearing everywhere as alien civilizations began questioning their Cromalian overlords. What had started as a simple first contact situation was rapidly becoming a galaxy-wide revolution. "Get me Dr. An Kung Jae from the Military Technology Department," she ordered. "We are going to need our best analysts working around the clock." Dr. An Kung Jae arrived within minutes carrying a thick folder of preliminary reports. He was a quiet man who preferred studying alien technology to dealing with politics. But the current situation required his expertise more than ever. "Admiral, I have been reviewing the Cromelian ship designs in detail," he reported. "The humans who met with their supreme commander were absolutely correct. These vessels are fundamentally flawed from an engineering perspective." He activated a holographic display showing a detailed breakdown of a typical Cromelian dreadnought. The analysis was even more damaging than what technician Bei Wujin had presented during the first contact meeting. "The structural integrity problems are worse than we initially thought," Dr. An continued. "Those decorative spikes are not just weak points, they actively compromise the ship's hull strength. In a real battle, these ships would likely tear themselves apart from the stress of their own weapons fire." Admiral Nam Juan studied the technical data with growing concern. "Doctor, are you telling me that an empire built on military intimidation has been using ships that cannot actually fight?" "That appears to be the case," Dr. An confirmed. "I estimate that a single Earth destroyer could defeat 3 Cromelian dreadnoughts in direct combat, simply because our ships are designed for function rather than appearance." The implications were staggering. The Cromelian Empire controlled nearly half the galaxy through the threat of their mighty fleet. If that fleet was essentially useless in real combat, then thousands of worlds were being held captive by an elaborate bluff. Captain Shin Yunji entered the command center with urgent news from the Outer System Patrol Fleet. "Admiral, we have a situation developing near the asteroid belt. 3 Cromelian ships have broken formation and are requesting permission to dock with our stations." "They want to dock here?" Admiral Nam Guan asked in surprise. "Yes, ma'am. Commander claims he wants to discuss switching sides and joining what he calls the human alliance against the Empire." The revolution was spreading faster than anyone had expected. Within hours of the broadcast, Cromalian ship commanders were beginning to question their own empire's strength. Some were even abandoning their posts to seek protection from the humans, who had exposed their military's fundamental weaknesses. Dr. An Kung Jae was working with a team of analysts to respond to the flood of requests from alien civilizations. His preliminary report on Cromelian military effectiveness was being downloaded millions of times per minute across galactic networks. "I never expected my engineering analysis to become the most popular document in galactic history," he admitted. To his colleagues, the report was titled Practical Space Warfare versus Theatrical Space Warfare. A comparative analysis, and it systematically destroyed every aspect of Chromalian military doctrine. Dr. On had used simple engineering principles and basic physics to prove that intimidation-based ship design was not just ineffective but actively harmful to actual combat performance. His conclusion was devastating. The Chromalian Empire represents a fundamental misunderstanding of both military psychology and practical engineering. Their ships are designed to look threatening rather than to fight effectively. This approach works only against opponents who surrender without testing the Empire's actual capabilities. Meanwhile, Captain Shin Young-ji was leading Earth's Rapid Response Fleet to assist newly liberated worlds. Her ships were smaller and plainer than the Chromalian vessels, but they were built for real combat rather than intimidation displays. The first test came when a Chromalian punishment fleet arrived at the rebellious world of Kepler-7. The local population had declared independence after seeing the human broadcast. The Empire had sent 12 dreadnoughts to force them back into submission. Captain Shin Young-ji arrived with just 3 Earth destroyers to help defend the planet. The Chromalian fleet commander immediately broadcast his standard intimidation message and demanded that the humans withdraw or face destruction. "This should be interesting," Captain Shin muttered as she studied the enemy formation. The Chromalian ships were arranged in their typical parade formation. It's perfectly spaced and glowing with decorative lights. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. The Chromalian ships, designed for intimidation rather than combat, could not effectively maneuver or coordinate their attacks. Their decorative armor cracked under their own weapons' fire. Their glowing displays made them easy targets for Earth's precision weapons. When the fighting ended, 8 Chromalian dreadnoughts were disabled, and 4 had surrendered without firing a shot. Captain Shin Young-ji's fleet had suffered only minor damage to one destroyer's outer hull. The battle footage was broadcast across the galaxy within hours. Alien civilizations watched in amazement as 3 small human ships easily defeated a fleet that had terrorized dozens of worlds. The psychological effect was immediate and devastating for the Chromalian Empire. Supreme Commander Vexstar received reports of the battle while still trying to figure out how to respond to the human broadcast. His most experienced fleet commanders were requesting emergency meetings. Several had openly questioned whether their ships could win any real battles. Krixmel approached his commander with the latest intelligence reports. "Sir, we have confirmed uprisings on 47 worlds. 16 Chromalian fleet commanders have requested transfers to non-combat positions. 3 entire battle groups have declared neutrality and withdrawn from their assigned territories." Vexstar stared at the reports in disbelief. His empire was collapsing not because of military defeats, but because of human laughter and engineering criticism. The humans had not fired a single shot in anger, yet they had accomplished what centuries of warfare had failed to achieve. "How did it come to this?" he asked nobody in particular. "We ruled through strength and fear. Our enemies trembled at the sight of our ships." "With respect, sir," Krixmel replied quietly, "it appears we ruled through the appearance of strength. Rather than actual strength, humans simply pointed out the difference." For the first time in galactic history, an empire built on intimidation was facing an opponent that could not be intimidated. The humans treated their threats as engineering problems, their displays as entertainment, and their military doctrine as a curious example of poor design choices. The Chromalian Empire was learning that there is no defense against an enemy who responds to your most terrifying weapons with helpful suggestions for improvement. 6 months after the first contact meeting that changed everything, President Jiang Minsu stood before the newly formed Galactic Council in what used to be the Chromalian Empire's Capitol building. The massive throne room had been converted into a democratic assembly hall where representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to discuss their shared future. The transformation was remarkable. Where once golden spikes and threatening decorations had covered every surface, practical lighting and comfortable seating now filled the space. The intimidating red glow had been replaced with natural white light that made everyone feel welcome rather than afraid. President Jiang Minsu looked out at the diverse crowd of alien representatives. Many species were attending their first free government meeting in decades. Others were learning about democracy for the first time in their civilization's history. All of them had been liberated not by weapons or warfare, but by simple human honesty and engineering common sense. Fellow citizens of the galaxy, President Zhang began his address 6 months ago. Humanity made first contact with the Chromalian Empire. We had no idea that our natural curiosity and practical thinking would spark the greatest peaceful revolution in galactic history. The audience included many familiar faces. Dr. Park Hanna was now director of the Galactic Scientific Exchange program. Captain Lee Minho had been promoted to admiral and was commanding the Joint Galactic Defense Force. Even former Supreme Commander Vexstar was present, sitting quietly in the back row wearing simple civilian clothes instead of his intimidating armor. Today we gathered to celebrate the establishment of the Terran Doctrine, President Zhang continued. This is not a human rule imposed on other species. It is a shared commitment to the revolutionary idea that technology should serve practical purposes rather than creating fear. The Terran Doctrine had emerged naturally from the collapse of the Chromalian Empire. As worlds regained their freedom, they began asking humans for advice on everything from ship design to military strategy. The requests were so common that Earth's government had established formal programs to share human engineering principles with any species that wanted to learn. Dr. Park Hanna's Galactic Practical Design Institute had become the most important educational center in known space. Located on a neutral world halfway between Earth and the former Chromalian capital, as the institute taught alien engineers the basic human concepts of structural integrity, energy efficiency, and tactical practicality. The institute's motto was displayed prominently above the main entrance: "Form follows function, not fear." It had become the unofficial slogan of the new galactic order. Former Supreme Commander Vexstar had been one of the institute's first students. After his empire collapsed, he had spent months studying human engineering principles and slowly understanding how badly his people had misunderstood the nature of effective technology. I ruled an empire for 50 years without ever learning the difference between looking powerful and actually being powerful, he had admitted during his graduation speech. The humans taught me that the most dangerous opponent is often the one who does not waste time trying to look dangerous. The transformation of Vexstar from galactic conqueror to reformed engineer had been one of the most surprising developments of the new era. He now worked closely with human technical teams to retrofit the galaxy's military fleets for actual effectiveness rather than psychological warfare. The process was not always easy. Many alien species had built their entire cultures around intimidation and dramatic display. Learning to value function over form required fundamental changes in thinking that went far beyond simple engineering problems, but the results spoke for themselves. Ships designed according to human principles were more reliable, more efficient, and more effective in every measurable way. Planets that adopted human-style governments were more peaceful and prosperous. Military forces trained in human tactics were better at both fighting and avoiding unnecessary conflicts. Admiral Lee Minho now commanded a joint fleet that included vessels from dozens of different species. The ships looked nothing like the old Chromalian dreadnoughts with their spikes and decorative flames. Instead, they were practical, efficient designs focused on protecting their crews and completing their missions. The most important lesson we have learned, Admiral Lee explained to new officers during training, is that real strength comes from competence, not from trying to appear scary. A ship that works properly is more valuable than a ship that looks impressive. The Galactic Practical Design Institute had graduated over 10,000 alien engineers in its first 6 months of operation. They returned to their homeworlds carrying human principles of practical design and efficient engineering. The knowledge spread rapidly as species discovered that human methods actually worked better than their traditional approaches. Dr. On Kyungjae's famous analysis of Chromalian military failures had become required reading at military academies across the galaxy. His follow-up papers on practical space warfare were considered the foundation texts of modern galactic defense strategy. Humans taught us that the goal of military technology should be to protect people and end conflicts quickly, explained General Quan Doyen during a recent lecture. Intimidation might prevent some battles, but competence prevents wars. New Galactic Order was not perfect. Some species struggled to abandon their traditional emphasis on display and ceremony. Others found it difficult to accept that their supposedly superior technology was actually less effective than human designs. There were still conflicts and disagreements between worlds, but the fundamental change was undeniable. For the first time in galactic history, the dominant military philosophy emphasized protection rather than conquest, efficiency rather than intimidation, cooperation rather than submission. President Jiang Minsu concluded his address to the Galactic Council with words that would be remembered for generations. 6 months ago, the Chromelian Empire came to Earth expecting to find another species to intimidate and conquer. Instead, they discovered that humans have a different response to threats. We do not cower in fear or submit to superior displays. We ask questions. We offer suggestions, and we try to help. The audience responded with the sound that had started the galactic revolution, human laughter. But now it was joined by the equivalent expressions of joy and amusement from dozens of different species. The sound echoed through the former throne room and out into the galaxy beyond. Former. Supreme Commander Vexstar raised his hand to speak. President Jiang recognized him, and the hall fell quiet. Mr. President, fellow citizens, Vexstar began in his reformed voice. I spent decades believing that fear was the strongest force in the galaxy. I thought that making others afraid would make me powerful. The humans taught me that I was completely wrong. He paused and looked around at the diverse assembly of free beings. Strongest force in the galaxy is not fear. It is curiosity. It is the desire to understand, to improve, and to help others succeed. Humans showed us that asking, "How can we make this better?" is more powerful than demanding, "Why should you not be afraid of us?" The final scene of the Great Transformation took place in the Institute's main laboratory. Dr. Park Hanna was working with a mixed team of human and alien engineers to design the next generation of galactic defense ships. The vessels would be fast, efficient, and effective, built to protect rather than intimidate, as she watched former enemies collaborating to solve technical problems together. Dr. Park reflected on the strange series of events that had brought them to this point. Humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization had not been superior weapons or advanced technology. It had been something much simpler and more powerful: the willingness to treat every problem as a puzzle, to be solved rather than a threat to be feared. The galaxy was finally learning to laugh instead of trembling, to build instead of destroying, and to ask questions instead of demanding submission. And it had all started because humans could not take theatrical intimidation seriously enough to be afraid of it. In the end, the most dangerous species in the galaxy had turned out to be the one that responded to threats by offering helpful engineering advice,